She was supposed to be invisible. Brenda Butler, 26 years old, linguistic prodigy turned waitress, had one job at La Corona. Pour the wine, serve the food, and disappear. But tonight, in the club's most secure private chamber, Miguel V. Pauly, New York's most dangerous power broker, is about to sign a $150 million contract to reclaim his family's ancestral Sicilian holdings. The parchment looks authentic. Hey family, before this story begins, I want you to do something real quick. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your comments fuel these stories. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button because what happens next will leave you speechless. The translation is certified. The notary seals are perfect. The genealogy is verified. Except it isn't. And Brenda, standing in the corner with a water carafe and a photographic memory for medieval Italian dialects, has exactly one chance to do the impossible: speak 7 words in archaic Sicilian that will stop a catastrophic fraud, expose a lethal conspiracy, and reveal that the invisible waitress knows more about his heritage than his own historians. December snow in Manhattan was cinematic, the kind that made the Upper East Side look like it belonged in a Scorsese film. On a street with no name, or rather, a street where the name didn't matter if you had to ask, La Corona occupied a converted Gilded Age mansion that whispered old money and older secrets. To call it a restaurant was technically accurate but spiritually insufficient. La Corona was where senators brokered legislation over burlo older than their marriages, where CEOs negotiated mergers that would never appear in SEC filings, where conversations that could topple governments happened over $500 bottles of wine. The dress code wasn't posted because membership was hereditary or by unanimous vote only. If you had to ask, you didn't belong. And moving through this sanctuary of power every evening, carrying trays and wearing a uniform that might as well have been camouflage, was Brenda Butler. At 26, Brenda had become an expert at erasure. Her dark hair was always pulled into an immaculate low bun, tied so tightly it made her scalp ache by the end of each shift. Her uniform, crisp white shirt, black vest with a small gold name tag she deliberately scratched to illegibility, black slacks pressed to knife edge. Perfection was always spotless. Her expression was trained to pleasant neutrality, the kind of smile that existed without reaching the eyes. She moved through the dining rooms like a shadow, filling water glasses before they were empty, clearing plates with movements so fluid they barely registered, anticipating needs before they were voiced, never drawing attention. She was invisible by necessity. Because if anyone looked too closely, they might recognize her. They might remember the State Department press release from 4 years ago about the youngest person ever accepted into the Foreign Service Institute's elite linguistic program. They might recall the academic journals that had published her master's thesis on Sicilian linguistic evolution. They might wonder what had happened to the brilliant young translator who'd been offered positions at the UN, the CIA, and Georgetown. 4 years ago, Brenda Butler had been a name whispered in academic circles with a mixture of awe and envy. She spoke 7 languages fluently and could identify regional dialects within minutes of hearing them speak. Her thesis, Linguistic Stratification in Medieval Sicily, From Norman Conquest to Aragonese Administration, had been described by one reviewer as the most comprehensive analysis of Sicilian vernacular evolution in a generation. She'd been 22 years old with offers that would have launched a career most linguists spent lifetimes building toward. Then her 16-year-old sister Maya collapsed during volleyball practice. Chronic kidney failure. Stage 4. Their parents had died in a car accident 3 years prior, making Brenda not just Maya's sister, but her legal guardian, her only family, her entire world. Dialysis cost $72,000 annually. The transplant waiting list was 3 years long, which might as well have been forever given Maya's declining kidney function. Private donor matching, the kind that could happen in months instead of years, cost $150,000 upfront, plus surgical expenses that could exceed another $200,000. The State Department salary offered $48,000 per year. La Corona's senior servers made that in 4 months, sometimes 3 during holiday season when the private chambers were booked solid with people spending money like it was a competitive sport. Brenda had made a choice. Maya lives, career dies. She ghosted her academic advisors, their increasingly worried emails eventually tapering off to silence. She declined the State Department position with a brief, professional email that offered no explanation. She'd stopped answering calls from Georgetown, from the UN's Translation Division, from the professor at Palermo who'd wanted her for a collaborative research project. She'd put her degrees in a storage unit in Queens, put her thesis publications in a box she couldn't bear to open, and put on an apron instead. That was 3 years ago. Maya was stable, expensively, precariously stable, and Brenda was still invisible. Until tonight. The name Miguel V. Polly meant nothing to Brenda when the assignment came through that morning, which meant her invisibility strategy had been successful. The kitchen staff knew better. The head chef, a third-generation Italian from Bensonhurst who'd seen everything twice, had made the sign of the cross when the reservation was confirmed. The sommelier had personally selected the wines, his hands shaking slightly as he handled bottles that cost more than Brenda's monthly rent. The maitre d' had briefed the staff with the kind of military precision usually reserved for heads of state: no mistakes. No delays. No visibility. You are ghosts tonight. Understood? At 7 p.m. exactly, Miguel V. Polly arrived. He was late 40s, with distinguished salt and pepper hair swept back from a strong, angular face that suggested Mediterranean ancestry, Sicilian, if Brenda's eye for ethnic features was accurate. A neatly trimmed beard framed a decisive jaw. His eyes were so dark they appeared black in certain light, and they moved constantly, cataloging, assessing, measuring threat levels with the automatic efficiency of someone who had learned young that hesitation was fatal. He wore a navy suit that had been tailored by someone who understood that true power didn't need to announce itself with logos or flash. The fabric moved with him like water, probably cost more than most people's cars, and somehow made him look more dangerous rather than civilized. With him came an entourage that mapped out the hierarchy without a word being spoken, an older man with steel-gray hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd spent a lifetime keeping other people alive. Victor Russo, his consigliere, Brenda would learn later. A sharp-eyed woman in her 30s carrying a leather portfolio like it contained nuclear launch codes, Carmen Reyes, his attorney. And 2 younger men whose excellent suits and careful posture couldn't disguise their primary function: personal security, the kind that knew where every exit was and could calculate firing angles while maintaining pleasant expressions. Brenda poured water, still, not sparkling, as specified in the briefing, filled 7 crystal glasses with movements so practiced they were nearly meditation, and vanished into her designated corner near the antique sideboard. Invisible. Waiting. Professional. At 7:30 p.m., the guests arrived. Vincent Torres entered like he owned not just the room but the concept of rooms: American, 50s, expensive suit in charcoal gray that somehow looked predatory rather than professional. His smile was warm bourbon and cold calculation. With him came Dr. Alessandro Ferretti, a severe Italian academic in his 60s clutching an archival case like it contained the original 10 Commandments, his credentials from the Archivio di Stato di Palermo embroidered on his reputation. Mr. Polly, Torres's voice carried the practiced warmth of someone who'd spent decades making people trust him seconds before betraying them. Tonight will change everything. Miguel's handshake was economical, brief, the kind that communicated power through restraint rather than aggression. Show me. Dr. Ferretti placed the archival case on the table with ceremonial gravity, the kind of reverence usually reserved for handling religious relics. He opened it slowly, dramatically, revealing layers of archival foam protecting something wrapped in acid-free tissue paper. Inside, nestled like a sleeping artifact of immeasurable value, rested a parchment document that made Brenda's breath catch despite herself, despite 3 years of training herself not to react, not to care, not to be anything except invisible. It was beautiful. Genuine 15th century vellum, yellowed to the color of old cream with the subtle texture that only centuries could create. Dense handwritten text in iron gall ink that had aged to brown-black. A large wax seal at the bottom, crimson and ornate, pressed with a signet that showed a crowned lion holding a sword. Brenda was supposed to be arranging bread plates on the sideboard, her back to the table, maintaining her invisibility. Instead, every linguistic instinct she possessed, instincts she'd spent 3 years systematically suppressing, had gone on high alert. She knew that document style. She'd spent 18 months studying 15th-century Sicilian administrative language for her thesis, had read hundreds of authentic decrees from the period, could identify the distinctive characteristics of Aragonese period Sicilian bureaucratic documents in her sleep. And something about the phrasing visible from across the room was catastrophically, irrevocably wrong. She was invisible by design, not accident. Brenda Butler had spent 3 years perfecting the art of erasure, and tonight, serving in La Corona's most exclusive private chamber, she needed that invisibility more than ever. La Corona occupied a converted Gilded Age mansion on a street where even GPS seemed uncertain. Membership wasn't purchased. It was inherited, or granted by unanimous vote of the existing members, which amounted to the same thing: if you had to ask, you'd never belong. This was where power dined with power, where deals that would never appear in public records happened over wine that cost more than most people's monthly mortgages. And Brenda moved through it like water, present, essential, invisible. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe center part and low bun so tight her scalp throbbed by hour 3 of every shift. Her uniform was pristine: crisp white shirt, black vest, black slacks pressed to perfection. Her expression was trained to pleasant neutrality. Every gesture was economical, practiced, designed to anticipate needs without drawing attention. 4 years ago, she'd been the youngest person accepted into the State Department's Foreign Service Institute linguistic program. She spoke 7 languages fluently, could identify regional dialects within minutes, had published a master's thesis on Sicilian linguistic evolution that academic reviewers called groundbreaking. The UN, the CIA, Georgetown, they all wanted her. Then Maya collapsed during volleyball practice. 16 years old. Chronic kidney failure. Stage 4. Their parents were 3 years dead. Brenda was Maya's guardian, her only family, her world. The math was brutal: dialysis cost $72,000 annually. The transplant waiting list was 3 years Maya didn't have. Private donor matching, the only real chance, required $150,000 upfront, plus surgical expenses that could hit $200,000 more. State Department salary, $48,000 per year. La Corona's senior servers, that amount in 4 months. So Brenda had ghosted her advisors, declined her offers, put her degrees in storage, and put on an apron. Maya lived. The career died. The choice hadn't even been difficult. That was 3 years ago. Maya was stable, expensively, precariously stable, and Brenda was still invisible. Until tonight. The name Miguel V. Polly meant nothing to Brenda when the assignment came, which meant her strategy had worked. The kitchen staff knew better. The head chef had crossed himself. The sommelier's hands shook selecting the wines. At 7 p.m. exactly, Miguel V. Polly arrived. Late 40s, distinguished salt and pepper hair and beard framing a strong Mediterranean face that spoke of Sicilian ancestry. Eyes so dark they appeared black, constantly cataloging threats with the efficiency of someone who'd learned young that hesitation killed. His navy suit was tailored by someone who understood that real power didn't announce itself. With him came his architecture of control: Victor Russo, steel-gray hair and watchful eyes, the consigliere who'd kept him alive. Carmen Reyes, sharp-eyed attorney clutching her leather portfolio. 2 younger men whose excellent suits couldn't disguise their primary function: security that knew every exit and could calculate firing angles while smiling. Brenda poured water, still, not sparkling, and disappeared into her corner. At 7:30, the guests arrived: Vincent Torres, 50s but looking younger, expensive black suit with open collar revealing a neck tattoo that suggested a past his current wealth tried to obscure. His smile was predatory. With him came Dr. Alessandro Ferretti, clutching an archival case. "Mr. Pauly," Torres purred. "Tonight will change everything." Miguel's handshake was economical. "Show me." And Brenda, invisible in her corner, felt every linguistic instinct she'd spent 3 years suppressing suddenly scream to life. Dr. Ferretti opened the archival case with ceremonial reverence, revealing a parchment that made Brenda's pulse spike despite 3 years of practiced indifference. Genuine 15th century vellum, aged to cream, covered in dense iron gall ink. A crimson wax seal pressed with a crowned lion. "The Decreto di Nobiltà of 1472, Ferretti announced, his accent thick with academic authority. Signed by King Ferdinand I of Naples, confirming the Pauly family's hereditary rights to the Duchy of Valdoro, 50,000 acres in eastern Sicily, including mineral rights, water rights, and 3 coastal villages." Torres leaned forward, predatory smile widening. "Authenticated by the Archivio di Stato di Palermo, the University of Catania, and independent verification from Oxford's Medieval Studies Department. Your family's claim is irrefutable, Mr. Pauly. 150 million in current valuation." Brenda was supposed to be arranging bread plates on the sideboard. Instead, she was reading the decree from across the room, her thesis training activating like muscle memory she couldn't suppress. She knew 15th century Sicilian administrative documents. Had spent 18 months studying them, could identify authentic period language in her sleep. And this document was catastrophically wrong. The phrasing near the royal seal, mediant la grazia concessa, through the grace granted. Tuscan administrative construction. 16th century bureaucratic language. Beautiful, formal, completely accurate for Renaissance Florence. Absolutely wrong for 1472 Sicily under Aragonese rule. Authentic documents from that period used Sicilian vernacular with Spanish loanwords. The phrase should read "Pi la grazia data re," for the grace given by. The linguistic register was off by 50 years and 200 miles. Someone had built a forgery on genuine 15th century parchment using period-correct ink and seal, but written it in the wrong dialect. The kind of mistake even experts would miss if they studied Italian documents but not specifically Sicilian ones. Miguel reached for his fountain pen, heavy gold that probably signed treaties. Brenda's hands trembled. Maya's treatment was in 10 days. This job paid for the dialysis, for the private donor search, for everything. Speaking up meant visibility. Visibility meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant losing everything. But the decree was fake. $150 million worth of fraud about to happen 3 feet from where she stood invisible. Maya's voice, sharp in her memory from last week, "Bren, you taught me that truth isn't negotiable. Don't forget your own lessons." The pen touched paper. Brenda's mouth opened. "Aspetta. Wait." The word came out barely above a whisper, but in that silent room it was a gunshot. "Cistu non è vero. È falso. This is not real. It is false." Time crystallized. Torres's smile froze mid-expansion. Dr. Ferretti gasped, his hand jerking toward the document protectively. The security men's hands moved toward their jackets in synchronized threat. Victor Russo's eyes snapped to Brenda with the intensity of a sniper acquiring target. And Miguel V. Pauly, very slowly, set down his pen. He turned in his chair with mechanical precision, his dark eyes finding her across the room. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Si-2? Who are you?" His voice was soft, dangerous, the kind of quiet that made people confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Brenda's entire future hung on her next words. 3 years of invisibility, her sister's life, everything she'd sacrificed, all of it balanced on the edge of a knife she'd just thrown herself onto. She stepped forward, out of the shadows, out of safety. "Subnu la camarera," she said in Sicilian. "I am the waitress." Then, switching to English because some truths needed clarity, "But before that, I was a translator. And that decree is written in the wrong language." The room held its breath as Brenda stepped fully into the light, her hands steadier than they had any right to be. "The decree uses Tuscan administrative construction from the 1500s, she said, her voice finding strength. "In 1472 Sicily, under Aragonese rule, official documents used Sicilian vernacular with Spanish loanwords. This phrase, mediant la grazia concessa, it's too formal, too Tuscan. A real document from that period would say pi la grazia data re. For the grace given by." Dr. Ferretti's face had gone from academic confidence to academic horror. He grabbed the parchment, studying it with new eyes. "The parchment is authentic 15th century, Brenda continued. "The ink is period-correct iron gall. Even the seal looks genuine. But the language was written by someone who studied Tuscan Italian, not medieval Sicilian dialects. They built a perfect forgery on authentic materials and betrayed themselves with linguistics." "Dio mio," Ferretti whispered, his hands trembling. "The linguistic register, she's correct. The vernacular is wrong. How did I miss this?" Miguel's silence was more terrifying than any outburst. He stood slowly, his movements controlled, predatory. When he spoke, his voice was Arctic calm. "Victor. Take Mr. Torres and Dr. Ferretti to the basement office. I'd like to have a conversation about where they acquired this document." Torres lunged forward, his mask shattering. "This is insane. You're going to trust a waitress over now." Miguel's single word carried such menace that security materialized instantly, hands on Torres and Ferretti, removing them with efficient violence barely disguised as courtesy. The door closed. The silence that followed was absolute. Miguel walked to the sideboard, selected a bottle, Barolo, 1985, probably worth more than Brenda's monthly salary, and poured 2 glasses with steady hands. He slid one across the table toward her. "Sitati. Sit. Not a request." Brenda sat because her legs had turned to water. "You just saved me $150 million, Miguel said quietly, "and possibly my life. Fraudulent land claims tend to end badly for everyone involved." He studied her with those dark, penetrating eyes. "I need someone who sees what others miss. Someone who tells me the truth even when it's dangerous." He pulled out his phone, typed something, showed her the screen. The number made Brenda's vision blur. "Weekly." That was weekly salary. "Full medical coverage," Miguel continued. "Any treatment, any hospital, anywhere. Your sister included." Brenda's throat closed. 3 years of invisibility, of sacrifice, of drowning slowly in debt, and he was offering salvation with the casualness of ordering wine. "What's the price?" she managed. "Loyalty. Truth, even when inconvenient." His gaze held hers. "Can you do that?" She thought of Maya, of dialysis appointments and transplant lists and 3 years of erasure. Thought of the moment she just lived through, speaking truth to power and surviving. "Yes." "Benedetto." "Good." "Benvenuto in ta famiglia." "Welcome to the family." He leaned back, still studying her with that unnerving intensity. "For 3 years, you've been invisible here. Tonight you stepped into the light. Why?" Brenda met his eyes, finding something like honesty in the ruins of her careful anonymity. Because staying silent one more time would have made me disappear completely. Not just to others. To myself. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Respect. Then let's make sure you stay visible, Miguel said, and raised his glass. To truth, Brenda Butler. However inconvenient it gets. 5 days later, Brenda stood in Miguel's Tribeca penthouse office and understood what real power looked like when it didn't need to announce itself. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson like a kingdom under surveillance. Furniture was positioned with strategic precision, every chair offering clear sightlines to entrances, nothing blocking exits. Climate-controlled glass cases lined one wall, displaying artifacts that made her academic training scream, a Byzantine icon that should be in the Hermitage, a Caravaggio sketch she'd only seen referenced in authentication disputes, a Roman coin collection that probably violated 6 international treaties. Everyone deserves a chance to make things right, Miguel had said when he allowed Vincent Torres to return. Including people who tried to defraud me. Torres arrived with Professor Elena Marchesi from La Sapienza University, Rome, credentials that should have been unimpeachable. The document she carried was spectacular, the Registra di Famiglia Poli, 80 pages of bound leather, genealogical records spanning 4 generations. Carbon dated 1515 to 1535, Marchesi explained with professorial authority. Ink analysis confirms period gall iron compound. Binding technique matches documented 16th century Sicilian bookmaking. This registry establishes your family as minor nobility with trading privileges, tax exemptions, coastal property rights worth approximately 80 million in current valuation. Brenda examined the pages as they were turned. The calligraphy was exquisite, authentically period. The vellum showed appropriate aging. Even the marginalia, small family notes in the margins, looked genuine. Then she saw the family motto inscribed on the opening page. Professor Marchesi, Brenda said quietly, when was the Council of Trent? Marchesi blinked, thrown by the apparent non sequitur. 1545 to 1563. Why? This document is dated 1523. Brenda pointed to the blessing formula beneath the family crest. But it uses post-Trent standardized Latin. Benedictus sit Deus in donis sui, blessed be God and his gifts. That phrasing wasn't codified until the Council standardized liturgical language, 20 years after this was supposedly written. The room went still. Pre-Trent, Sicilian families used regional variants with vernacular mixing, Brenda continued. An authentic 1520s registry would use something like Benedicus ie Dion tali so duna, a Sicilian Latin hybrid. This is too standardized. Too perfect. Torres surged forward, his careful mask disintegrating. This is absurd. Professor Marchesi is one of Europe's foremost. Silenzio. Miguel's voice was ice. He turned to Marchesi. Is she correct? The professor's hands trembled as she examined the text again. Her face collapsed like a building losing its foundation. The blessing formula it's standardized. Too standardized for 1523. Dio mio, how did I miss this? Miguel stood with terrifying calm. Mr. Torres. Get out of my building. If I see you again, it won't be a conversation. Security materialized. Torres was removed, his protests fading. When the door closed, Miguel turned to Brenda, something dangerous and amused playing at the corners of his mouth. You just humiliated a La Sapienza professor. She humiliated herself by not checking ecclesiastical history, Brenda replied, then winced. Sorry. Reflex answer. Miguel almost smiled. You have a gift for making powerful people look foolish. Is that going to get me killed? Eventually, probably. His eyes held hers. But not by me. By me, you're going to get promoted. He pulled out his phone, typed something, showed her. Her salary had doubled. Tomorrow, Miguel said, we hunt whoever's creating these forgeries. Because someone is getting very good at this, and they're specifically targeting me. The way he said we made Brenda's pulse spike for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. 2 days later, Brenda sat surrounded by 3 years of Miguel's acquisitions, cross-referencing linguistic patterns across 23 documents. The pattern was damning, 40% authenticated by Carmen Reyes, Miguel's own attorney. All involved Sicilian provenance. All purchased through Vincent Torres's network. She was noting a repeated anachronism in blessing formulas when she saw it. A red dot on her chest. Laser sight. Precise. Professional. Miguel. He moved with inhuman speed, tackling her behind the desk as the window exploded. Bulletproof glass cracked but held, spider webbing across the panoramic view. 3 shots in rapid succession, suppressed rifle, the distinctive thwip-thwip-thwip of professional work. Stay down, Miguel commanded, his body covering hers. Russo was already on the phone, barking orders. Sniper, construction site across the river. 600 meters, maybe more. Building locked down now. Miguel's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression going arctic. Unknown number, the linguist sees too much. Next time, closer range. We move, Miguel said. Now. They couldn't stay, sniper repositioning meant the office was compromised. Service elevator to the parking garage, Russo already there with a black SUV, engine running. They were barely out of the building when 2 motorcycles materialized behind them, weaving through Tribeca traffic with lethal intent. Why are they trying to kill me? Brenda gasped, pressed low in the back seat. Miguel's voice was grim. Because you're the only person who can identify these forgeries. You're the witness who can't be bought. The safe house was a Soho loft registered under a shell corporation that didn't officially exist. Russo swept the space while Miguel guided Brenda to a chair, his hands surprisingly gentle as he examined a cut on her temple from flying glass. You saved my life, Brenda whispered, watching him work. Again. You saved mine first. His dark eyes met hers. We're even. Her hands were shaking. He covered them with his, steady and warm, and something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with adrenaline. Russo returned with an encrypted laptop, his expression murderous. Torres's communications. Digital forensics pulled wire transfers to Dr. Ferretti, Professor Marchesi, and he paused. Carmen. Miguel's face went cold. Carmen authenticated these documents? Knowingly. She's been on someone's payroll for at least 18 months. Russo pulled up more files. All the forgeries were commissioned by the same source. The screen showed an account, D. Polly Holdings. D. Polly? Brenda looked at Miguel. Family? His silence was devastating. The kind of quiet that came before violence or grief or both. Dante, Russo said finally. Your nephew. Miguel stood, walked to the window, his shoulders rigid with betrayal. My sister's son. I paid for his Oxford education. Brought him into the business. He's been positioning himself to take over, Russo continued. The forgeries weren't about money. They were about control. Plant fake documents, use them to challenge your legitimacy, create chaos in the organization. Classic coup strategy. Brenda watched Miguel's reflection in the window, a man realizing that family and loyalty were sometimes mutually exclusive concepts. Where is he? Miguel's voice was soft, dangerous. Russo checked his phone. Brooklyn Navy Yard. The old family warehouse. Then that's where we're going. Miguel turned back, his eyes hard. Because this ends tonight. That night, Miguel moved Brenda to a second safe house, a Red Hook warehouse converted to industrial loft, all exposed brick and steel beams and surveillance equipment that probably violated several laws. My nephew, Miguel said quietly, staring at the evidence on Russo's laptop. My sister's son. I paid for his Oxford education. Brought him into the business when he graduated. Why would he do this? Brenda asked. Control. Legacy. Miguel's jaw clenched. He thinks I'm too cautious, too old-fashioned. He wants the empire, and he's willing to destroy me to get it. At 11:47 p.m., the power cut. Not a flicker, complete, absolute blackness. The backup generator should have kicked in. Silence. Gas line cut, Miguel said, his voice deadly calm. Professional crew. They planned this. The Molotov cocktail crashed through the window 3 seconds later, spreading flame across Old Wood that accelerated like it had been waiting decades to burn. The tactical team breached through the service door before the glass stopped falling. 5 men, military gear, suppressed weapons that made quiet, lethal coughs in the darkness. Russo and 2 bodyguards returned fire. 1 bodyguard went down, wounded, bleeding. Brenda saw the industrial shelving, chemical supplies from when the warehouse had been a printing facility. Her thesis training had included cultural history, including medieval siege warfare tactics. She grabbed turpentine containers, improvised incendiary devices with shaking hands and pure desperation. Then she started shouting in rapid Sicilian dialect. Du cci sunu, dar la macchina russa. 2 of them, behind the red vehicle. The attackers hesitated, confused. They spoke standard Italian and English, not the archaic Sicilian Brenda was using. Avi unrecaricato, traci ora. He's reloading, go now. Miguel's eyes widened. She was giving them tactical advantage through language the enemy couldn't understand. They fought their way to the east fire escape, Brenda helping the wounded bodyguard while Miguel covered their retreat. He took a bullet to the shoulder, through and through, high enough to miss major arteries but bleeding badly. Russo's car was waiting 2 blocks away. They piled in, tires screaming. In the back seat, Brenda worked with first aid supplies, applying pressure, creating a tourniquet with hands that barely shook despite everything. Where did you learn field medicine? Miguel asked through gritted teeth. Sister's dialysis, Brenda said, stitching with careful precision. You learned to handle emergencies. You threw improvised explosives and ran tactical communications in a language they couldn't understand. I'm a very thorough translator. Despite the pain, Miguel laughed, genuinely laughed. Dio mio, you're extraordinary. Their eyes met in the dim light, and something shifted between them. Something beyond employer and employee, beyond protector and protected. Russo was tracking intercepted communications on his phone. His expression went dark. Encrypted message just came through, target survived. Polly moving to Red Hook terminal. Vincent says proceed with Phase 3. Vincent Torres is coordinating with Dante, Miguel said quietly. Russo nodded. Phase 3 is eliminate Miguel, install Dante, absorb operations. They're planning a full coup. Where is Dante now? Old family warehouse, Brooklyn Navy Yard. The one your father left you. Miguel's smile was sharp and absolutely terrifying. He's making a statement. Thinks he's already won. He turned to Brenda. You should leave. This isn't your fight. You said I'm the only witness you can trust. Brenda finished the last stitch, tied it off. That means I'm coming. It's going to be dangerous. More dangerous than the last 3 hours? Considerably. Brenda met his dark eyes steadily. Then let's make sure we survive it together. Something flickered in his expression, respect, admiration, something warmer that neither of them had time to name. Together, Miguel agreed, and the word sounded like a promise. The Brooklyn Navy Yard warehouse rose like a Gothic monument against the night sky, moonlight streaming through broken windows onto rusted industrial equipment. Miguel's team moved silently, Russo, 3 loyal bodyguards, and Brenda with her phone recording in her pocket. The doors were unlocked. Lights blazed inside. An invitation or a trap, probably both. Dante Pauly waited on the main warehouse floor like he was holding court. Early 30s, handsome in that expensive education way, wearing a suit that screamed Oxford and entitlement. He sat behind a salvage desk position like a throne, flanked by 6 armed men. Vincent Torres stood beside him, predatory smile firmly in place. "Zio Miguel," Dante called out, his voice carrying the polished cadence of someone who'd learned English at boarding school. "Uncle. You look terrible. Someone shoot you?" "Your people," Miguel said quietly, his wounded shoulder hidden beneath his jacket. "Your plan. My vision. My future." Dante stood, gesturing expansively. "Everything you're too frightened to build. You inherited everything from Nano, the business, the respect, the legacy. What did I get? Allowance. Oxford tuition. A seat at the children's table during family meetings." His voice rose with each word, years of resentment crystallizing into rage. "I'm smarter than you. Better educated. I speak 4 languages. 5, Brenda interrupted quietly. "You speak 5. You're forgetting Sicilian." Dante's eyes snapped to her, his expression twisting into contempt. The waitress. The linguist who ruined everything. He turned back to Miguel. "You hired an outsider. Someone not blood. That's weakness, Zio." "She's the only person who's been honest with me," Miguel replied, his voice deadly calm. "Which is more than I can say for family. I trusted you. Paid for Oxford. Brought you into the business. And you repaid me with forgeries, assassination attempts, betrayal. You call it betrayal. I call it evolution." Dante smiled. "The forgeries were brilliant, authentic materials, expert execution. Carmen authenticated them beautifully once we explained her gambling debts. The tracking devices mapped your entire collection. The assassination teams were professionals." He was confessing everything, too arrogant to realize Brenda's phone was capturing every word. "Vincent financed the operation. 40% profit share once I take over. We eliminate you tonight, install me as head, expand operations aggressively. The old families will fall in line once they see real leadership." "Enough talk," Dante said, his smile sharpening. "Vincent, kill them." Torres pulled his gun. "Aspetta." Brenda's voice cut through the tension. "Un du manu." "Wait. One question." She switched to rapid Sicilian, speaking directly to Dante. "Si tu sei veramente siciliano, ci significano sti parole?" If you're truly Sicilian, what do these words mean? She recited an archaic Sicilian proverb about family loyalty, the kind passed down through generations, the words twisting through dialect so old even modern Sicilians might struggle. Dante hesitated. His expression flickered, confusion, then frustration. His Sicilian was academic, textbook, learned at Oxford from professors who'd never walked the streets of Palermo. He didn't fully understand what she'd said. Brenda switched to English, her voice carrying across the warehouse. He doesn't even understand his own heritage, Miguel. He's faking everything, the language, the loyalty, the legitimacy. Just like the documents he commissioned. The truth hung in the air like a blade. Dante's face contorted with humiliated rage. "Kill them," he snarled. "Kill them all." And the warehouse exploded into violence. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Dante's 6 men against Miguel's 4, wounded Miguel, Russo, 2 bodyguards, and a linguist who just humiliated their boss. Shipping containers became cover, industrial equipment turned into obstacles, and the space filled with the distinctive crack of gunfire echoing off steel. Brenda started shouting in rapid Sicilian dialect, coordinating Miguel's team with the same precision she'd used earlier. "Try sono dar lu container verdi. 3 behind the green container." Dante's mercenaries hesitated, confused by the language they couldn't parse. Their coordination fractured. "Carcavuxai, avia ricaricari." "Left side, he's reloading." Miguel's team moved with lethal efficiency, understanding every word while their enemies stumbled in linguistic darkness. Vincent Torres broke from the firefight, cornering Brenda near the warehouse office. His gun leveled at her chest. "You stupid girl. You could have stayed invisible." Brenda met his eyes without flinching. "I spent 3 years invisible. I'm done." Torres's finger tightened on the trigger. Russo appeared behind him, double tap center mass, professional and final. Torres collapsed. Dante realized he was losing. His face twisted with desperate rage as he pulled out his phone. "Phase 4, he snarled. "Burn it all down." The explosions were simultaneous, charges around the warehouse perimeter, demolishing structural supports. The building began collapsing, steel groaning, concrete cracking. Dante ran for the emergency exit. Miguel intercepted him despite his wounded shoulder, years of experience compensating for injury. They collided in brief, brutal hand-to-hand. "You're finished," Dante gasped. "The other families know you're weak. The other families will hear you confessed everything." Miguel's voice was ice. Brenda recorded it all. Dante's face went from rage to shock to murderous calculation. He lunged past Miguel, straight for Brenda. She was the evidence, the witness, the recording. He grabbed her, gun materializing against her temple. "Let me walk, or she dies." The warehouse groaned, another support beam failing. Brenda spoke in archaic Sicilian, the words rapid and precise. "Idu avi nu secundu fusiline ta scarpa manu sinistra." He has a second gun in his left ankle holster. Miguel understood. Dante didn't. Brenda dropped suddenly, her body going limp. Miguel fired, single shot, Dante's leg, precise and disabling. Dante fell, screaming, both guns skittering away. "Move!" Russo shouted. They carried Dante out as the building collapsed behind them, steel and concrete imploding in a cascade of destruction. Outside, snow was falling, turning the industrial wasteland into something almost beautiful. "Ambulance and police 3 minutes out," Russo reported. Miguel turned to Brenda. "You just saved us." Again. The adrenaline crashed out of her system all at once. Her legs gave out. Miguel caught her, his good arm wrapping around her waist. "Stay with me, Brenda." "I'm okay," she managed, though she was crying now, shock and relief and 3 years of suppressed emotion breaking through. That was a lot." "You're remarkable." His voice was rough, intimate. "Terrifying and remarkable." "I thought he was going to kill you," she whispered. "I thought he was going to kill you." They stood there in the falling snow, the warehouse burning behind them, sirens approaching, holding each other like they were the only solid things in a world that had tried to destroy them both. "I can't lose you," they said simultaneously. The words hummed between them for a heartbeat. Then Miguel kissed her, desperate, real, tasting like snow and survival and promises neither of them had planned to make. She kissed him back with 3 years of invisibility breaking apart, 3 years of silence finding voice, 3 years of erasure finally, gloriously ending. When they broke apart, snow melting on their faces, Brenda smiled. "So," she said, "does this mean I'm getting another raise?" Despite everything, Miguel laughed. 3 months later, the headlines told a story Brenda still couldn't quite believe was real. The New York Times had run it above the fold, international document forgery ring exposed, $200M fraud prevented. The Wall Street Journal called her the linguistic expert who uncovered systematic art world deception. Art news got more personal, the waitress who saved history, Dr. Butler's forensic linguistics. Dante Pauly sat in federal custody now, facing RICO charges but cooperating, naming names, unraveling networks. Vincent Torres was dead, killed in that warehouse confrontation that still visited Brenda's nightmares. Carmen Reyes had turned state's witness, trading testimony for a reduced sentence and disbarment. Dr. Ferretti and Professor Marchesi faced academic fraud charges, their credentials revoked, their reputations destroyed. The forgery network had stretched across 4 countries. 12 arrests. Dante's empire systematically dismantled. Brenda had authenticated Miguel's entire collection. 67 forgeries of varying sophistication. $127 million in fraud prevented. Her academic paper, Linguistic Forensics and Document Authentication, was already being cited in journals she'd once only dreamed of reading. Maya's transplant had been successful. The donor match had appeared privately, all expenses covered before Brenda could even ask. Miguel had simply said, "Family takes care of family." Maya was recovering beautifully, attending NYU now on a full scholarship from something called the Butler Institute, planning to study pre-med. Miguel had transformed too. He'd announced his transition to legitimate operations, real estate development focused on historic preservation, cultural foundations celebrating Sicilian heritage and linguistic preservation. The security businesses remained, now operating as a fully legal private security firm. He was becoming the man Brenda had always suspected lived beneath the carefully constructed armor. The Butler Institute for Linguistic Preservation and Cultural Authentication occupied a renovated brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, funded by Miguel's $50 million endowment. Brenda was its director. Her mother would have loved the mission, training linguists in forensic document analysis, preserving endangered dialects, protecting truth through language. At the opening gala, Brenda stood in an elegant dress, hair down, radiant with a confidence she'd earned through fire. Miguel stood beside her in a tailored suit, his arm around her waist. In the press photos, they looked like equals. Partners. A reporter approached. "Dr. Butler, how did you identify the forgeries?" "I listened," Brenda said. "To the language, to the history, to the truth documents tell when you know how to hear them." "And Mr. Pauly, why fund this institute?" Miguel's answer was simple. "Because truth is worth protecting. Dr. Butler taught me that." Later, on Miguel's penthouse balcony, snow fell gently over Manhattan. They held champagne, vintage Cristal, 1990. To the waitress who said this is false, Miguel offered. To the boss who listened, Brenda countered. They drank. The city glittered below them, full of possibility. 3 months ago, I was invisible, Brenda said quietly. You were never invisible. Not to me. From the first moment you spoke, I saw you. What do you see now? Everything. Brilliant, brave, beautiful. The woman who saved my life and changed everything. You changed everything too. Gave me my voice back. Gave Maya her life back. Gave me you. Miguel turned to face her fully. Will you stay? Not as an employee. As a partner. In everything. In everything, Brenda whispered. Their second kiss was unhurried, certain, full of promise. Outside, the snow continued falling, covering the city in silence and light, while inside, two people who'd survived something terrible together chose love anyway. Everything in this story flows from Brenda finding her voice after 3 years of silence. Her linguistic expertise, her courage, her value, all of it stems from refusing to stay silent when truth demands speech. The ultimate lesson of this is that the world will always pressure you to be smaller, quieter, more convenient. Resisting that pressure, speaking your truth, using your gifts, taking up space, is how you transform from invisible to invaluable, and as humans you must know these 5 things. 1. Your specialized knowledge matters. 2. Your voice deserves to be heard. 3. Your boundaries protect your identity. 4. Your vulnerability creates real connection. 5. Your integrity defines your legacy. The story's message isn't Waitress becomes successful through luck. It's brilliant woman stops hiding her brilliance and changes everything. That's the lesson. Stop hiding. Speak up. Your voice might save someone's life, starting with your own. Before we end, I want to ask you something. Have you ever made yourself invisible to survive? Maybe at work, where you don't speak up in meetings because you're afraid of being wrong. Maybe in your family, where you've learned that keeping the peace means staying quiet. Maybe in a relationship where you've made yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Brenda spent 3 years erasing herself, her brilliance, her voice, her identity, to keep her sister alive. And when she finally spoke up, when she said those 7 words in Sicilian, everything changed. Not just for Miguel, but for herself. So here's what I want to know. What's your 7 words? What's the truth you've been too scared to speak? If this story reminded you that your voice matters, that your expertise has value, that staying invisible is slowly killing you, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share this story with people who need to hear it. Then drop a comment telling us, what skill, knowledge, or truth have you been hiding that the world needs to see? Don't be modest. Brag about your obscure expertise. Tell us what you know that nobody else seems to understand. Because somewhere, someone needs exactly what you've got. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories about people who refused to stay small, who spoke truth to power, who chose visibility over safety. Because your story might be next. And when you're ready to tell it, we'll be here to listen. Finally, and this is important, share this video with someone who's been making themselves invisible. Someone brilliant who's been told they're too much, too loud, too impractical. Someone who needs permission to stop hiding. Because Brenda Butler started as invisible. And she ended up invaluable. The same could be true for you. Now tell me, are you done hiding? Comment I'm done if you're ready to be seen. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I truly appreciate you taking your time to listen to Just Believe Stories. Until I come your way again next time, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, goodbye.